Hello, in today's step-by-step walkthrough video, I'll be using SPSS version 30 to perform, interpret, and write up a chi-square test for independence. I recommend downloading today's dataset before we begin. You can also access this resource in the Psychology Resource Library. Here we have our dataset within SPSS. We have two variables, toothpaste preference and profession. In this specific example, we're interested in whether being in a dentistry or non-dentistry related profession is related to toothpaste preference. If we toggle over to variable view, we can look at the type of data that we have. In order to run a chi-square test for independence, we have to have nominal or categorical data. If we look here at our values, for toothpaste preference, we have two categories or levels. One corresponds to a preference for paste toothpaste, and two corresponds to a preference for gel toothpaste. Likewise, with our profession variable, we have two levels or categories. One corresponds to those in a non-dentistry related profession, and two corresponds to those in a dentistry related profession. To run the chi-square test for independence, we go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and we move down to crosstabs. If we've conceptualized an IV and DV, we would typically put the IV into the columns box and the DV into the target list box. You still get the same results regardless of which variable you put into which box, but for ease of interpretation with how it presents the information in the output, that's what we might consider doing. So in this example, we do have an IV. We think that being in a dentistry or non-dentistry related profession might influence your toothpaste preference. So we move profession into the column box and toothpaste preference into the target list box. We then go to statistics. Here we want to ensure that chi-square has been selected. We also want the phi and Kramer's V selected under nominal, as this will give us our effect size. Continue. Cells, we would like both the observed and expected counts, and also the column percentages. Continue. Then, instead of pressing OK and automatically providing our output, we'll select paste. Here we have the syntax within the syntax window, and you can save this and then rerun your analysis at a later date without having to use that stepwise process that we just completed. You highlight the syntax and press the run button. So here we have our output. So in this example, we have a 2x2 contingency table. In other words, we have two variables, profession and toothpaste preference, and within each of those we have two levels or categories. In other words, we have four possible combinations of these levels or categories. So you could be in a non-dentistry related profession and have a preference for paste. You could be in a non-dentistry related profession and have a preference for gel toothpaste. You could be in a dentistry related profession and have a preference for paste, or you could be in a dentistry related profession and have a preference for gel. Now looking at the expected and observed counts. What this means is that if we had no relationship between profession and toothpaste preference, we would expect to see 35.2 participants falling into this category of being both in a non-dentistry related profession and preferring paste. Our actual count is 33. Likewise, if we had no relationship between these two variables, we would expect those falling into this combination of levels, 34.8 participants to fall into this category, and in actual fact, from the data within our dataset, the participants in our study, we saw 37 people falling into this category, and we interpret the same then for the rest of those combinations of categories or levels. Moving then to the percentages, we can see that 51.4% of those who were in a dentistry-related profession preferred paste, and 48.6% of those in a dentistry-related profession preferred gel. So it looks like there's a very similar likelihood of preferring paste or gel if you're in a dentistry-related profession. If we look at those in a non-dentistry related profession, 45.2% of people in a non-dentistry related profession preferred paste, whereas 54.8% preferred gel. So we see a larger difference between those falling into each of these two levels of the paste. However, to see if there is actually a statistically significant relationship between these two variables, we move down to our chi-square tests table. If we look at our p-value for our chi-square test, we can see that that is above the 0.05 threshold for significance. In other words, there is a non-significant relationship between being in a dentistry-related profession and preference for toothpaste. If we then move down to our effect size, we'll look at Kramer's V today. This is a commonly used effect size, and you can also use this effect size regardless of the number of levels that you have for each of your variables. And this can be considered a very weak effect. The write-up for this test could look as follows. A chi-square test for independence was conducted to determine whether there was an association between working in a dentistry-related profession and preferences between gel and paste toothpastes. Participants working in a dentistry-related profession had a similar likelihood of preferring paste or gel, while those in a non-dentistry-related profession demonstrated a slightly higher preference for gel over paste. However, the association between profession and toothpaste preference was non-significant, with a very weak effect size. If we think about the variables that we want to incorporate into this write-up, we include the percentages for participants falling into each of these four combinations of the levels of the IV. We then move down to our chi-square tests table. We include the degrees of freedom. We include our p-value, significance value, and we also include our Pearson chi-square value, as well as our Kramer's V effect size value. You can access the full suite of resources in the Psychology Resource Library. Follow our YouTube channel for more walkthrough videos like this one.